It is the Anfield Wrap. Neil Atkinson with Dan Morgan, with Gareth Roberts, and with John Gibbons. It is in association with The Athletic. The Athletic is very much worth subscribing to. If you go to theathletic.co.uk/the Anfield Wrap, there you can find loads of fantastic stuff. And later on, I'll be talking to Sarah Shephard about the piece she's written about Liverpool women. That is to come. You know how the structure of this works by now. We have a little bit of a chat about current events. Then we go back to key games under Klopp. This week it is the Europa League run. Manchester United home and away, Dortmund home and away. And then we will talk later on in the show about a young player. This time out, we're going to talk about Curtis Jones. So a lot to come right the way through. John, it was interesting, first and foremost, the back page of the Times was some sort of idea that the government is going to call upon football to raise national spirits. This was always going to, one way or another, become the case. They would have done well not to piss the footballers off, really, wouldn't they?
Well, maybe. I don't think when footballers are making this decision, I don't think they're going to be thinking about the government. To be honest with you, I think they're going to be thinking about, with their own safety, but also the fact that it's what they do and what they love, so that they're going to want to get back playing. At one point, it's Arsenal have obviously gone back training today, albeit at distance from each other. So it does feel like there's starting to make moves around, what they can do to get playing kind of sooner rather than later. And I think, the footballers, there will be some who will have concerns, over health issues. What's going to happen with this? Just obvious stuff that a lot of us will have about going back to work, to be honest with you. But you just hope that they can be answered. And also, we're obviously a little bit behind other countries who've announced it already. So I think learning best practice is the key. Seeing what they do in Germany, where they always seem to just nail everything and just copying them. I like the idea of the one club that's doing the drive-through, where you'd all drive up to this thing and watch it. I'd like to sort that if possible. But Bags, you're not driving.
Gareth, in general, it was... I don't know what you're finding. I'm finding the weekends are hitting harder, to be honest with you. Almost like the circadian rhythms of being used to there being a thing. Weeks, I think, because we're busy doing Anfield Wrap stuff, but also just in general, weeks and weeks. It's the weekends where, Saturday was a perfect day for me to have been watching a 12:30 kickoff, having a lovely afternoon, being annoyed I'm not playing football, which happens every now and again. Not that I do anything about it ever, because I'm nowhere near active enough. But living that reality a little bit. Saturday was one of them where everything couldn't have been better to go to a football match, and there wasn't one. And I'll be really honest with you, it hit hard.
Yeah, same here, mate. I had I'm sure everyone these days pretty much is in like WhatsApp groups with the mates, and look, groups of lads aren't the best, are they, in general? I know I'm generalising, but groups of lads aren't the best places sometimes to talk about how you feel and where you are. And I just thought it was quite telling in the group I'm in, which can be, very macho, typical Scouse, all that kind of stuff. But everyone just started sharing pictures of us, basically, with each other at various times down the years. And I was watching it like build up and more pictures drop in, and I was thinking, everyone's missing each other here, aren't they? I think it's fair to say. And then the conversation shifted onto, let's sort out, like a European football trip for after all this. Like where should we go? Should we go to Bundesliga? Should we go here? Should we go there? Loads of people suggesting games and clubs that they'd like to go and watch and places that they'd like to go to. And of course, then it got to the end and everyone was like, all right, yeah, so whenever we can do that, then we'll look at that again. But yeah, I think a lot of people were feeling the same way. And I just reached the point, which I've done a few times during all this, where I was like, okay, got to go and do something now, which doesn't involve thinking. So I just I went out on my bike and did like 21 miles on my bike, which I was quite happy with. Went to Crosby and back.
You should have knocked around, not that you could have come in.
I know. Could have been socially distant, couldn't I? I did laugh on my journey. I mean, I'm not saying something was going on there, so I won't name it, but just during my journey, I passed a pub, and there was a fella stood on the doorstep of it with a pint in his hand and a ciggy. And I think he was probably just the fella who was running it rather than there being anything more to it. But again, it did make me think, oh, you know what I mean?
I reckon he's gone from his house, poured the can into a pint glass it is, and gone the pub. I just reckon he misses the pub that much. That fella, he's gone and had the pint as close to the pub as he can.
Quite possible, I wouldn't rule that out currently, but yeah, I think there is, there's something to be taken from all the stuff that's come out the last couple of days. Quite nice to see things called Project Restart and things like that. But there is still the sort of looming reality of something else kicking around there as well, because like the more in-depth pieces, I think in Jonathan Northcroft's piece he was talking about, there's still got to be a reality where they're saying it's going to take this long to train them up, then this long to play the games, and you feel like there's still an undercurrent, not from all clubs, but some clubs and some figures in football where they're still saying, yeah, restart for now, but still not sure. Do you know what I mean? So the uncertainty is still there, isn't it? But I think there are some positives to take. I mean, I think tentatively they're talking about a month after Germany, as John says. Bundesliga now is saying May the 8th. It looks like Premier League is saying potentially June the 8th.
Just there's a really good piece. I just recommend it in general. I'm going to pick a couple of bits out just to chat to you about Dan. Not that I expect you to have read it, because I didn't put it on an agenda or anything. But there's a really good piece by Sean Ingle in The Guardian about sport in general. Basically, horse racing, football, cricket should, broadly speaking, find a way back, but other sports are going to struggle. He cites the British Basketball League playoff finals at the O2 Arena, for instance, generate around a third of the whole league's income every year. Obviously, and I always mention them, not that I've ever been and I'd love to go, but it's still got to be there when all this comes back, is rugby league. Rugby league is a sport that's massively reliant on audience. But also the idea of people being able to be active. Gareth mentioned they're getting out on his bike, but gyms and things like that will be struggling at this time as well. And in general, there's a trend that those in lower socioeconomic groups are less active, full stop, and that'll only grow in a pandemic and in a recession. Sport's going to have to think about how it's going to look after itself a little bit, is what I'm sort of driving at, Dan. There's a bigger picture than just football. We talk about Liverpool, we talk about football, but sport, full stop, people being active, everything that the whole way all sport works is going to be under massive pressure off the back of all of this.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think perception's a big thing as well. I think there's quite a flippant element to people linking sport to society in many ways, and we've seen that around football. The notion that why should football get preferential treatment in starting before industry and stuff like that. But then you make your counter arguments of, like you say, how important sport is to the wider concept of this country's ebb and flow, really, and that in itself can also be knocked down or dismissed by some. I don't think it should be. I think that there's a huge demand for sport in a watching sense, in a social sense, but also as an activity, something we take part in. I go to a boxing gym, and the sense of community that's been lost from that, even before you get in there and work out for an hour, is massive. People you come to know of, people you come to speak to, and a place that you put in your routine is going every week. And that's the same for going to Anfield or Goodison or wherever you go. It's part of your makeup, your life's makeup. And okay, we do this for a living, which takes on a whole different sense of gravitas, if you like, but at the same time it makes it no less important to a person's life because it's so ingrained in your life. And I think that's where, for me, I think one thing that's been maybe slightly overlooked is just how important it is to the participants themselves. And I think we're seeing in football that football's biggest commodity, of course, is its players. And I think the welfare of those players is being tested massively by the fact that they can't be around their own environment every day, never mind playing. They can't be around their own environment. They can't be around a thing that's come to form part of what their life is since they left school. And that's got to be a hugely impactful event on their lives, and that's got to be treated carefully as well as everything else, I think, going forward.
Couldn't agree more. One last little thing on it, John, on the idea of participation. I know you still a part of Manuel and play. You've got a team this season that obviously that's had to pause. I noticed the Greens, my first side, before I, stepped down gracefully, where the WhatsApp group was back in, as Gareth says the other day, people talking about that side and what it meant. I think that there's something massive, isn't there, around participation. I just, just looking through the hot mic comments, I can see Andrew Swift's in there, for instance, who sits behind me at the match, and it was just nice, literally, to see his name. There is this sudden sort of void, to be honest with you, and it's in every sense. It is in the idea of there being a break, of there being something else to go and do, of people being able to be fit and active, and Manuel's a really good example of that, but also of people feeling a sense of togetherness, and that is difficult, and it isn't just the idea of Premier League footballers, although they'll be suffering from it as well, as Dan's just said. It is the idea of everyone who looks to participate in sport, however you define what sport is.
Yeah, and look, people are going to be dealing with it differently, and we'll see that amongst the just the people we know in life. Some people are using it as an excuse to have a bit of a break from certain things or whatever, or more time with the family. Other people sort of struggling, and there doesn't seem to be sort of any rhyme or reason on it based on kind of what you do or who you are or what you sort of set up with. I think it's just a case of what you sort of need from life at that time, really, and it'll be the case for people up, throughout the country. But sport does do a lot for people. It does bring people together. It does, whether you're playing or whether you're watching, it does give some escapism. And you mentioned the Manuel there thing. I do that does a lot for men in this case, for people who've want to make some improvements in their lives, physical and mental, and the support structures in there, and people might have lost their support structures as well, and it's a lot harder when the plan was we just get together every Thursday or whatever and do this, and then there's this going on the Sunday, then that's easy. But when that goes, it's like, well, is the chair and Manuel then to ring around 100 lads a week? It's just not practical. So when there's things like that, and footballers will be feeling it, and I feel for in terms of the Premier League lads, it's tough, but at least they've got the season's back on, and we'll be back on at some point. I mean, Gareth did something really good with lower league sides whose seasons have just been completely cancelled, and that must be so hard on your mental health when, look, South Liverpool are my local side now, and they were hoping to go into the league next season, and that's not happening. And these group of lads who, a lot of them should be playing at a higher level, should be playing in the league pyramid already, have put their faith into this thing and have top of the league, scored all these goals, and suddenly, like, it's basically none of it counts, and you're writing it all off. And I've been thinking about them a little bit and what that must have to do to basically not just be in this situation now, but being told that everything you've done over the last 8 months basically is written out of history, is a crazy thing to sort of tell someone. And so, yeah, I think people will be finding it tough, and it's just what we've always said, it's checking in on people best you can, checking in on your mates, and not just assuming that because no one's saying something to you that they're all right, because people deal with things in different ways.
Okay, want to pull us right the way back. Thank you very much, everyone there. I want to pull us right the way back to 2016, Gareth. And I want to talk, rather than the specifics within the games we may well come to, but I want to talk about that Europa League run once we got the other side of Augsburg. Last week we mentioned the League Cup final against Manchester City, but in terms of key games under Klopp, I actually think in that first season, Manchester United home and away in the Europa League, and Dortmund away and home in the Europa League, there's a real sense, because of literally how the games play out, we get really lucky with the draw. In that, you wouldn't have wanted Man United and Dortmund. Klopp himself says before Dortmund, it was the what he didn't want, it was the team he didn't want to get, and he gets it. But for me, there's a real sense after these games that the football club is genuinely different in a way that might have taken Klopp 12 months, 18 months to do. The actual events of these matches, the way they play out, and the results that Liverpool get within them, all basically shift the club on, I think, a lot more than firstly was given credit for at the time when you were living it, but also secondly, than maybe we give credit for now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember, around the time there being pieces on the website that I'd edited, stuff that I'd written myself. And, before Klopp had come in, there was big chat among lots of fans, and they might sort of forget it now. It might have been sort of lost in, all the good times you've had since. But there was big chat then of it being broken and it being really hard to fix in terms of atmosphere, in terms of what Anfield could be like. Lots of people were saying it'd been lost and we'd never get it back and all this kind of stuff. And obviously Klopp did want it back, work hard himself to get it back. It was central to his plan to have that back. And I think getting Man United in the Europa League, straight away you were like, well, let's show them. Do you know what I mean? And I can remember a lot of sneery comments from Manx and people who write around the Manx about, here we go, atmosphere, FC, let's hear all about the atmosphere, all of that kind of stuff. And then they come to Anfield and they saw the atmosphere and we absolutely battered them. We had the kecks off. The atmosphere was brilliant. And we did the European night right. And it was like, and to me, that was one of the things, as much as wanting to win it on the pitch, I wanted us to win it off it as well. I wanted us to show them the difference, if you like. And I know that gets up the nose good. And they didn't do it right at Old Trafford. It wasn't as good at Old Trafford. You know what I mean? So for me, that was huge. Dortmund as well was huge for different reasons. But again, I think once we'd done United and we could see how good it could be, and like we sort of all remembered about European nights, then it spilled into the Dortmund night as well.
Dan, it's almost unfashionable, and understandably so, because there's a line in football that you make your own luck, and there's definitely an element of that being true. And then for me, I've always said, it's not about making your own luck, it's about riding your luck when you get it. So let's, and I think that's a really important thing to say. But I think when you look through Klopp's time at Liverpool, in the same way that you can say it for almost every manager, there is moments where he touches lucky. And he touches lucky in a way that he himself might be genuinely a little bit surprised by. And at the time, as I say, might not have felt like it was touching lucky. You wouldn't have wanted United and then Dortmund. But he does get lucky because of what United and Dortmund does for him, does for the team, does for the general feel around the place. So he rides that luck. Liverpool get the results. It's massively because of Klopp that they do. But it is still being able to ride the luck when it's presented to you.
Yeah, almost a look at the timing. I think United's a really interesting point in that, because I think it's easy to forget. Manchester United beat us home and away in the league that season, and they got a 1-0 at Anfield in the 31st of January, I think, which is only a couple of months before we get them in the Europa League. And I remember, certainly from myself, when we draw them out the at, I was absolutely fine with it. I wasn't advocating getting them in the draw, but I certainly had no trepidation about facing Manchester United, because it just felt like, for me, it felt like the Mata double at Anfield felt like the end of something, with Manchester United and Liverpool, and certainly Manchester United holding a certain sway over Liverpool. And I think Jurgen Klopp coming in just emphasised that a little bit more, and then we get them in the Europa League, and the timing just seems right for us to get past them. And we did a review recently around the Dortmund game, and again, it's what Klopp gets to not only sell from that, but also to cling on to going forward. The concept, as I said at the time, that scoring a goal isn't climbing a mountain, it's just scoring a goal. And on that night, Liverpool need to score 4, and they do, and they need to score 3 in 20 minutes, and they do, or whatever it is. So there's tons of which Klopp can look at the draws and say, well, not only did we come through the other side, but we've kind of buried all these ghosts that have lived, that I've told you just need to bury if we're going to go anywhere together. And I think that part of that run became part of him laying the foundations of, this is how we change, this is how this whole thing starts to change now. And in the end, I'm not going to say, obviously, it didn't matter that we didn't go on and win the thing. We were 45 minutes from it, and that was hugely disappointing and gutting to take. But the journey had already taken us to where we needed to, if you know what I mean. The journey had sort of given us the points we needed to hit on the way, and all but for 45 minutes in which we don't get to finish the job off. We sort of do the job that we've set out to do in that competition that season.
It's really strange to me, John, the United game, and the reason why is because it's a Europa League game. It's the last 16, and I feel as though we beat them. And since then, we haven't looked back in the context of Manchester United. On the comments here, Steve said, beating United in Europe is important for the story of the football club. And for me, that's it. At this point, United finish ahead of us when Mourinho's in charge. They get a big second place in seasons to come. They do a good job. The following season, 16-17, they finish beneath us. We're the ones who feel like we got the momentum. The year after, they come second, we come fourth, but we get to the final. And I just remember, in 16-17, going there and just almost feeling like we've made these irrelevant. It was a 1-1 draw and it was a dog of a game. But I really do feel as though this game against Manchester United, home and away, since then, we just have not looked back.
I don't know about made them irrelevant. I think it's the opposite. I think because they are seen as the standard in English football. I think that made it even a bigger win. And I remember under Houllier, beating Man United was this massive thing. He used to talk about it. He said, one day we will beat Manchester United. And obviously that was a better United side than the one that the Klopp came into to come up against. But at the same time, it's the dominant force in English football. It is Manchester United, and so I think the best thing about that European win was, for me, it sort of did a double. It was like a double win. It was like a double kind of benefit, really, because normally I don't think you'd want necessarily an English team in Europe, but I think for this it was progress in Europe. It was all the idea of everyone looking at Liverpool again because we're doing well in this competition, but also it was, and we can do something, we could do something against this top English side as well. And so I think if it had been seen as sort of irrelevant, then it wouldn't have had the same impact as what it did. I think it felt like our first sort of big win at home under Klopp. That one, I don't know if that might be wrong. That might be, someone might point out that there was maybe another one, but for me, that felt like the first big win under Jurgen Klopp at home, and then to go away and finish the job as well. It felt like, okay, we're about something now. This is what we're doing. It's sort of like on this day that we did this morning, which is out on a tour player probably before this. We talk about that Chelsea semi-final and the fact that it was getting to Istanbul, but also it was beating this team who were over 30 points ahead of us in the league. They beat us 3 times that season, but it was like, so it was Liverpool are back, not just because we're in a European final, but we've shown we can match the best team in the country.
Obviously, absolutely huge as it plays out, Dan. There is the next thing that happens, I think, with these is they do the business at Anfield against United, but then that away game, the manner of the Coutinho goal again, the sheer swagger of it, and then the comfort with which they see it at home second half, all of that as well just made you, as it sort of had an ongoing resonance across the rest of that season, that Liverpool had gone to Old Trafford and, broadly speaking, kept them at bay. We didn't even allow it to become dramatic, really. We just saw them off.
Yeah, it's almost a slaying of ghosts, isn't it? I remember the first 20 at Old Trafford being in your mind as, oh, here we go. This is your worst fears coming home to roost, and then, you concede the penalty on about half an hour, and you go 1 down, and again you've got the pre-Klopp fears coming back in, and then, like you say, the manner in which we literally sit them down on the stroke of half time, and it almost feels like tie done. Is again, it's the thing that we get to take forward, and I think you can almost make a comparison to that first 20 minutes to City in the Champions League quarter-final a couple of years later, in that you're expecting this this barrage of everything that could go wrong, possibly going wrong, and you're telling yourself the worst case scenario. But in the end, this Liverpool team just find a way to get themselves where they need to be in a game of football. And I think that shouldn't be taken for granted, just how long we hadn't seen that. I mean, distrust in a football team is a terrible thing. I mean, ask any Evertonian. But at the same time, we had that for a long time. A position like a goalkeeper, for example, or conceding set pieces, conceding corners. Distrust in a football team is, we just think it's in ourselves, in a crowd, in a stand. It's not. It lives right throughout the football club. And I think this manager recognised that, and like I say, these all became building blocks and part of something bigger. And in many ways, you know, it sort of became the story of 15-16. And, you know, you got a load of sort of irrelevant league games in between by way of them. And looking back now, you can make an argument that actually helps things. You know, there isn't this pressure to turn something every single game. It's one game every 3 weeks, and we look forward to what we can turn. And even the Villarreal 1-0, the semi away where we get beat, the sense that Liverpool would not stand for that happening at Anfield, and the fact that they then don't, again, tells another story. And you get to, there's nothing better than telling a story of Liverpool in Europe. And I think that's what helps that season. I think that's what helps Klopp get the board out at the end of the season to his players and go, look what we did mentally, but also, you know, physically on a football pitch, and look where we got to. And like someone said the other day on a show, I think it's almost beneficial that we don't then have European football the next season, because he gets to do California pre-season. You see everything that comes out of that with shape, how much he's working on shape every week. It's all about shape, and he gets to implement his team on the training pitch in between a full week of playing games. So, you know, everything for a reason, and these stories that this manager has built to get Liverpool to where they are now, they're built on such fine margins and things that could have went completely a different way. But this season's just another one of those that form part of a larger perspective.
We've done a lot on Dortmund, Gareth, over both recently, but also at the time we went out there. It was one of the first times as the Anfield Wrap we'd probably gone out and really looked into a European away. Yeah. And one of the things about it was it felt huge. And I think that both the fact that the stadium was huge, Dortmund were a serious proposition. You know, I think it's the biggest European night the club's been involved in since the semi-final in 2010 against Atletico Madrid. And even that didn't feel as big because there'd been Champions League games normally. And I think that, you know, you forget now the fact that Dortmund felt like the biggest football match over two legs Liverpool could possibly have.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was another one where it was definitely sort of really important in sort of the tale of Liverpool and where Liverpool were at and where they were going and what they were about. And, you know, I think it maybe gets a little bit forgotten that, you know, when we're knocking Man United out, you know, Dortmund are knocking Spurs out and battered Spurs at their place. So for us to go there and do what we did there, and then do what we did in the second leg in particular as well, you know, again got everyone talking about Liverpool, where they were going, where they were headed, and what they were about under Jurgen Klopp. And you know, when we were just talking there, I was looking back at that the side we had out against United and what Dan's talking about there about sort of the trust in the side. I mean, you know, it sounds harsh, but I'm really glad that I'm not watching Mignolet, Klein, Lovren, Sakho and Moreno as our back five these days. Do you know what I mean? And also I think as well, when you look back at that, you think, do you know what? He did well to get something out of them, didn't he? Do you know what I mean? And there are plenty of other players, you know, both in the first team and on the bench that night who have now gone. And yeah, he got stuff out of them quite quickly. So, yeah, I mean, I think Dortmund was another one of them as well, where it sort of challenged, you know, the European order almost as well. So, we heard a lot about how their atmosphere was brilliant, how they did it right and we did it wrong. I mean, I remember me and you interviewing that sort of ultra fella and being like, oh, fuck off. Because he was giving it, he was giving it absolutely loads about how they were brilliant at creating atmospheres and we were shit. And I was fuming while carrying out the interview, just thinking, well, wait till you come to Anfield, son. Yeah. And then it turns out we were right, mate. We've not heard from him since.
Me and Robert walked away from that interview and we were like, we're fucking twatting these, you know. We pinned his comments on the dressing room wall. And it would be fair to say we were both looking at each other like, is anyway, we're gonna have a go at this fella or what? Thought, no, we'll let the team do the talking. John, you know, to sort of sum it all up, because, you know, we don't need to go into necessarily the ins and outs, but again, when you talk about being lucky, listen, part of what you do is you ride every game to the last minute, and that's something that Klopp tried to instill in everyone from the minute he turned up. But the way that Dortmund's second leg plays out, Liverpool again, they do have to ride the luck, and that's absolutely fine. Dortmund don't take a couple of chances in the first half they should take to maybe kill the game. And then Liverpool in that second half, all the way until the very, very end, hang in there. And then there's the moment. And that is, that's the sort of thing that if you are Jurgen Klopp, that's when you know what the football club is capable of, the power of the entire enterprise, what Europe is to Liverpool. It's, I don't think you can underplay how massive Dejan Lovren's header is.
Yeah, it reinforces what Klopp's been saying since day one, isn't it? So there's, this season, there's the Crystal Palace game where everyone just gets off and he says he feels very alone. There's, there's the fact that the people then stay, and then there's the West Brom, and there's the 2-2, and he takes everyone to the Kop and gets slaughtered a little bit by certain people who don't really get what he's trying to do. But then this is the one where he can go, right, well, everyone can see now. Everyone can see the benefits of sticking together. Everyone can see the benefits of keeping belief. And everyone can see the benefits of fighting until the last minute. And it's everything the Klopp wants in one night, Dortmund. It's, he does the quote of, you pull people down to our level and then you can beat them. And luckily we don't need to do that anymore because our level's just higher than everyone else's. But in those days, there was an element to that. Dortmund came to Anfield and straight away looked the better side, and it was a case of, well, are we going to deal with this then? And we do it. 50,000 people or whatever it is at that point in that ground. Including the lads on the pitch. All find a way all together, and then it's important for any manager, I think, to have something early, which is the sort of statement performance, if you like, and the one you can point to and go, that's everything that we're about. That that's the crowd sticking with us. That's the fact that we're making so much noise and we're rattling so much. They've got to get in a huddle and go, what the fuck's going on here? And then we still score from the corner. And it's everything that you're able to go this, that. If you can point to something, any manager can set out a vision. And, the best managers do it and set out, this is what we're going to do. It might be a 5-year plan or whatever, or it might be a case of, smaller steps, but, setting that out. But if you can show people as soon as possible what it is, I think better. And we certainly did that against Dortmund.
Okay, great stuff across the board for a fantastic European night from a Liverpool point of view. Coming up, we're going to have a chat about Curtis Jones. Before then, right now, from The Athletic, a really good piece about Liverpool women was published over the weekend by Sarah Shephard. So I've spoken to Sarah Shephard. Well, to be honest with you, I'm going to do it soon. I haven't done it yet, but I'm sure it's absolutely brilliant. Back in a second with Curtis. Joined by Sarah Shephard, staff writer for The Athletic, to talk about a very long, and I don't mean that as an insult, I mean it as a compliment, a very long exploratory piece she's written into the decline of Liverpool women across the last few seasons, but obviously focusing in on the most recent one, Sarah. And I think the first thing to point out, though, is that idea of it actually being quite a long decline. It's quite a long story. It's not as simple as they've had a bad season or something's not gone as well as it should. This is something that's been building since Liverpool women actually last won the WSL. It's a story that's 3 or 4 years in the making.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I spoke to obviously a lot of people for the piece, which was basically an aim to try and find out why this decline has occurred. Why there is such a disparity between the success of the men's team and what's happening with the women's team. Not that they should be interlinked, but it just makes it even more kind of stark when it's that situation. And a lot of the people that I spoke to who are actually around the team at the time that they were successful, when I spoke to them and sort of said, what's changed between then and now, they said, well, at the time, actually, we didn't have much money. They didn't have much money. There wasn't, it wasn't a huge amount of investment that went in. It was just that at that time, the Women's Super League was still quite young. No one else was really investing huge amounts, and Liverpool were able to attract players because it was Liverpool. So even then, when they were winning, they weren't necessarily putting, millions and millions and millions into it. So what happened between then and now is that other teams have come in and started really investing. Liverpool haven't increased their they have increased their investment, but not in line with the way that other teams have. And so it's kind of left them falling behind in this race.
Investments are really interesting. investment is money, but I think it's also time and infrastructure. I think one of the things that comes from the piece is if your reading of it, and I want to get into the idea that at times writing about women's football is almost trickier than writing about men's football because there's still question marks over contract length. A lot of the stuff that we take for granted that we find out in men's football, it's difficult to find out in women's, at least it seems to be the case. But first and foremost here, a lot of what you're discussing really is a question around infrastructure. That it isn't just the idea of literally what are you paying the players or a transfer fee question. It is the idea of having a rationalised, timed plan around building an infrastructure around the women's team, which Liverpool haven't had, and as a comparison, Manchester City have.
Absolutely. And I should stress that I think I spoke to around 8 or 9 people, and I think only 2 people mentioned wages, and neither of those were players. Mm-hmm. They were people around the women's game. So for the people who are actually involved in it, it is, like you said, it's more about them feeling part of the club and feeling that the club are giving them, the tools to do their job properly. And that isn't about what they're earning week on week. It's about where they train, and having the right facilities to be able to be professional football players, which is what they are supposed to be.
When you look at that, is this it was easier, obviously, to cobble something together almost 5, 6, 7 years ago. Is this a sort of a lack of there being somebody who effectively takes ownership of what's happening with women's football in Liverpool Football Club? So almost seeing almost 2 separate entities, but someone acting as a bridge and managing sort of a process either at a managerial level, the way someone like Emma Hayes has been able to at Chelsea, or at a more structured corporate sense of what we would sort of think of maybe as a sporting director or director of football around the women's team, to be able to speak a corporate language. Is that been where there's been that shortcoming, do you think?
I think so. I know they've had a few different people who have sort of been general managers, I think they call them in the women's game, and there is a young guy there at the moment whose name escapes me, who's not been there that long, and that's the case really with everyone who's involved in the women's team, is that they've only really been involved in it for the last 2 years. So there's no one who, like you said, has been driving it, who is there to be that bridge between the women's team and the club. And even the manager, Vicky, who everyone that I spoke to, sung her praises as a coach. She's an excellent coach, but in all regards, doesn't have perhaps that experience that an older manager might have in terms of dealing with everything around the team that isn't just things on the pitch, and maybe having the confidence and the experience to push for more when you need it, which I know is something that Emma Hayes has done brilliantly at Chelsea. From the moment she went in there in 2012, she was pushing the club for more and more. And I just don't think Liverpool have had that person.
When we talk about that, one of the examples you cite in the piece is that there was a long period of this season, for instance, where Liverpool didn't have a strength and conditioning and coach full time. And this is something which you would think was again, it seems pretty straightforward, but this is an example, not necessarily of people making, and I think we've got to be really careful in all conversations like this, not to presume there's someone with a big box going, no. But it's more the idea of someone being able to say, well, we haven't got this, we need to get this, and being able to bridge that. And that's what, I think in your piece, you are very, very keen to emphasise that this is a structural thing, and that's what that structure would do, ensure there was a strengthening and conditioning coach for the women's players.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when the club explain it in terms of there being a lag between the time someone leaves their job and someone's recruited, we all understand that happens in every walk of life. But you know that in a club that was prioritising and really on top of everything, they would have had a solution ready to go. They would have made sure the previous one stayed long enough, so there wasn't that kind of gap of months. So like you said, it is just about thinking about the women's game as something important, which it is. If you're going to have a women's team, treat it with the importance that it deserves. If you want it to succeed, you have to give it the right tools.
One of the things that strikes me in amongst all of this, you mentioned, for instance, the attendance figures. It was previously at Widnes. It's moved to Tranmere, where the team plays. Prenton Park. Prenton Park comes with its own question marks in terms of the pitch, for instance. Again, Emma Hayes mentioned that, although she did sort of retract those comments. But there is something, I think, where you find with the women's game, it strikes me that when I watch the England's women's team, there's a lot of people who've either passed through Liverpool or are actually from Liverpool, playing for that Liverpool women's team. And within the piece, the club have mentioned to you that they are looking to prioritise the future, that there is, it feels to me, like culturally thriving women and girls interested in football in the Liverpool City region and wider Merseyside region, and yet they're not at Liverpool. And I wonder whether or not that part of the reason why is that we're not able to tell that story because of the speed with which these women move on to other clubs now, because the facilities that they want aren't at Liverpool.
Yeah, the women's game is so different to the men's when it comes to contracts. I think that the usual contract length is 1 or 2 years. So, if a player is not happy or a player moves there and finds, well, actually, this isn't quite what I was expecting, they're not going to hang around for much longer than those 2 years. And I think I was told there were 12 players out of contract this May, which again is not unusual when contract lengths are so short. But from what I was told, there aren't many of those that will be staying on. There will be a few, but then again, there will be a lot of turnover, which is what's happened, I think, in previous years. Like 2018, I think 4 players went to Manchester United, which was obviously a new team. And
the division below.
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, the turnover is interesting. And like you said, it doesn't really give players a chance to build anything there. But it's also quite telling, about what things are like at the club.
There's something in what I found interesting with women's football as a whole, and it is sort of a Liverpool thing, I think. And this isn't, the FA has made the decisions it's made, and I actually think that the FA should be praised for the growth of women taking part in football, not just in terms of a professional game, but also, women and girls of different ages starting to take the sport up off the success of the national side. I do think there's obviously always that disconnect with the city of Liverpool and the national side, and I think it's been sort of present there. But then this comes back to how Liverpool haven't been able to hold their own talent and hold their own city's talent and tell the city's story through that talent is something which I think is a real shame. And I think it's really frustrating when when you're looking at, for instance, someone like Lucy Bronze ends up playing for Manchester City rather than for Liverpool women, and it's not quite clear why, other than a pretty small amount of money.
Yeah, it's astonishing when you look back at the players that have been at that club, in 2013, 2014 when they were winning the title. Yeah. So many players that went on to become, England regulars, and even the likes of Gemma Bonner recently, who is going to go on to become an England regular. So yeah, it just seems like such a shame that, if the club had the infrastructure in place and was providing players with the right facilities, I think they would be happy to stay. I don't think with most players in the women's game it comes down to wages. A lot of the time it comes down to, them feeling part of a club and part of something important, which is what Siobhan Chamberlain said when she left for Manchester United, that she wanted to be somewhere that she felt was pushing the women's game on. And that's obviously what she didn't feel she had at Liverpool.
This feels like it could become for Liverpool women, and for the club as attached to it, sort of a reputational issue / question over a period of time. That'd be something which you'd think would be concerning the club internally, that if people do feel as though it's always going to be better somewhere else or something like that, that's a tricky thing, isn't it, now, because it has been a long period. This isn't, as I said before, it's not just one season. This season's gone particularly badly, and there's some sporting reasons why, but sort of feeling as though some lip service is being paid, for instance the summer tour, but the lived reality for these players week in, week out isn't what other WSL sides want, what the women's game wants as a whole, is reputationally long-term not great for Liverpool.
Yeah, and they're obviously concerned about that, because the rhetoric that they put out is 2 teams, 1 club, which is great. It's lovely, and it would be brilliant if actions backed up that phrase. But that was one of the things that I was hearing from a lot of people, was that they felt there was a disconnect between what the club is putting out there in terms of that message and the reality. So I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes, because they feel like the club wants the positive PR and, the kudos of, yes, we've got a women's team, because Manchester United got so much flack when they didn't have one. Eventually they started one. So Liverpool, they can say, yes, we've got one and be proud of it, but then they're not doing the things necessarily behind the scenes to kind of, back it up.
Do you think there will be a change, Sarah? Do you think that change is on the horizon from Liverpool's point of view? Do you think the change is that difficult? Do you think it needs maybe someone to work with Vicky be a driving force internally there in order to be able to bring about some change? Because it does seem to me as though there is an appetite within Liverpool at some levels to bring that about. Do you think it would take much to improve the situation markedly?
I think it would help if Vicky had some help, definitely. I have been told that there are talks going on in terms of the future of the women's club, in terms of where they train, etc. That's not to say that they will definitely move into the new training ground, but it's not to say that they definitely won't, which doesn't really say a huge amount, but they are talking about things, which is one positive. But yeah, I think for any real change to take place, you need someone to come in who can really drive it, who is that bridge between the women's team and the ownership. Because I think there is a willingness there. Whenever I've dealt with Liverpool, they've been excellent to deal with. They're not the kind of club to just say, you're wrong, this is how we're doing it. So I'd be surprised if they weren't at least thinking about the fact that something needs to change. But making that change, if it's long-term and structural, is quite difficult. But I think it would definitely help if Vicky had someone there to kind of bat for her, if you like.
Okay. The piece is terrific. It really is. It's on The Athletic. You can read it, obviously, if you sign up. You can do that through the Anfield Wrap. It is theathletic.co.uk/the Anfield Wrap, and there are reductions around the price on there. It is exactly the sort of thing that you want to read. Trust me on that one. Thank you very much to Sarah for writing it and coming on the show. And we'll hand back over to everybody else. Great stuff from Sarah there, or at least we hope it was. I'm absolutely certain it will have been. If you want to sign up to The Athletic, it is theathletic.co.uk/the Anfield Wrap to be able to take advantage of all sorts of offers there. Sarah's piece is exactly what The Athletic is brilliant at and brilliant for. Very much is, as you've just heard, a real deep dive into everything that's been going on for some time around Liverpool women. Want to talk about Curtis Jones, and I've been sort of holding back when we've been doing young players, Gareth, on Curtis. Because he is the one who ultimately, if I say I'm not the most excited about necessarily, in that, I think there's a chance that, for instance, Harvey Elliott might go on and be absolutely unbelievable and score 1 million goals. I still have so much faith in Rhian Brewster, it kills me. But I do actually think of all of them, Curtis Jones is the one. The manager said it. He is the one who you do feel as though is most likely to get 100, 150, 200 appearances for Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, he seems so comfortable with it all, doesn't he? I mean, it's sort of... I was just looking there, and it's only 9 appearances for Liverpool and 2 goals. And it feels like he's sort of been around for a while now, and you're just sort of really used to him being there and being comfortable and being able to come on and influence games. And we all know he's not a shy lad in terms of how he plays football and his confidence levels. I mean, Klopp's mentioned that a few times with a bit of a wry smile on his face. And we were talking before we pressed record on this about how, all the Zooms that Liverpool are doing, and you're seeing bits and bobs of them. It's really funny how, like, Klopp is towards Curtis, because it's almost like, it's always like, oh, you're up, are you? Type of thing. He's like the naughty kid at school, but the naughty kid at school who was really talented at something, and everyone acknowledged that almost. So yeah, I mean, who doesn't love him? I mean, I absolutely think he's fantastic. Obviously, love the story, love the backstory, love the fact that he did what he did against Everton. And there's no doubt that there's a character there as well. I think you saw that in that advert that they did. I know, probably some of that was scripted and all the rest of it, but just it was so spot on, the idea of him sitting there watching his own goal on a phone during a team meeting. It was absolutely brilliant. That's so. It's just a case of, from his perspective, he's just got to keep going, keep doing things right. I think he's had quite the journey to get where he's got to. I think we found out more about that as time's gone on, in terms of his ma taking him on 2 or 3 buses to get to training and things like that. People sort of forget about that side. I mean, it's easy. I've seen the term bandied around like it was with Fowler, the toxic terror and all this kind of thing. And it's like, that's just such an easy and quite lazy narrative to put to it all. To get to where he's got to already has took amazing dedication, has took a lot of hard work. And so the idea that, he's a bit of a, there's a bit of a lovable Scally about him, but equally, he's being a dedicated sportsman to get to here and to do what he's done already. And the fact that he's being given the long-term contract, Klopp said what he said about him, as you say. I think it will be interesting to see where it goes. I mean, there are a few players likely to go, aren't there? You know, where you think, well, that could help Curtis. So, you know, Shaqiri is probably going to go, Lallana's probably going to go, and maybe then that opens up some opportunities for him to play. Because the next step for him now is obviously to see him in Premier League games a little bit more. So we've seen him in a certain type of game, haven't we? A game where youngsters are being blooded, or it's a competition that's not as important to Liverpool right now. And that's well and good, and he's performed in those. But now we need to see him on the Premier League stage a little bit more and performing on that stage.
It's a shame Johnny hasn't had the opportunity to get a bit more time in the league even to date before the football stops. In that he's made a couple of benches. He'd probably like to have made a couple more, but it's difficult for the manager. It's not just picking an 11, it's picking a bench. But also, when he's been on the bench, it felt like the games are maybe a bit tighter than Liverpool would have liked at times. I think he gets on for the last 2 minutes against Norwich, which is one where somewhere in the manager's head he's thinking, I'll have Curtis on the bench, and if it's 3-0 on 60, I'll throw him on. And it doesn't play out that way. It is a bit of a shame for him, isn't it, that he hasn't quite had a bit more time. And that maybe now this break might mean that he would have got a bit more time towards the end of a normal season. But now those players, as we mentioned before, might just be desperate to play, who normally are Liverpool's first team players.
Yeah, absolutely. So much of it is luck, isn't it? If you look at a lot of even the best players in this country at the moment is how they got their go. You know, Marcus Rashford only plays for Man United because they have got so many injuries up front, so they throw him in, and then he does brilliant. You know, I think the Europa League's done well for quite a few players. It did well for Henderson. It was good for Henderson in Liverpool. Harry Kane was another one who made his name at Tottenham with the Europa League run. It's different if you're in the Champions League. You know, you're not throwing young lads into that, and so I think a lot of it is circumstance, and he's just had to be patient. And like Gareth says, he's, you know, you feel like he has been around for a while now. You know, we do the pre-seasons, you know, over in America. He's done at least 2 of those pre-seasons now where he's been around the team. So for him, you know, he'll feel like he has been in that first team a lot. He's obviously been training at Melbourne for a long time as well. So, you know, people are, you know, might say, oh, you know, he's had a breakthrough season, he's done really well, but he'll probably feel like, well, I know he will because he said it, because he's not shy. If I feel like he maybe, you know, should have had a few more opportunities that he has, but it just sort of hasn't quite worked out for him. But I'm with Gareth, and I think that, you know, Lallana will most likely go in the summer. You're looking at Shaqiri as well, and Klopp said in the past that his ideal summer is not doing any signings, and is saying that these are your new players, and what better situation than this next transfer window to do that, and just to say, look, Lallana's going, Shaqiri's going, and the replacements are Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott, and we want to see more of them next season. And I think most Liverpool fans would be excited by that. Yeah, they'd probably want one big star up there as well, you know. But if you said we're buying Timo Werner and then we're just giving these boss young lads more time next season, I think for most supporters, you'd hope anyway, they'd be like, yeah, brilliant. I'd love to see more of Curtis Jones next season.
It is the barrier question all the time, Dan, and you know, it's interesting the 2 names that John's mentioned there. Lallana, who's played an important part, I think, this season on the pitch, previous seasons possibly behind the scenes, if we're honest about it, and also Shaqiri, who's just not been able to get himself on the pitch. So, you know, he does need the barriers to move out the way, I think it's fair to say, and that he can only do what he can do to get them out the way. He can be brilliant in training, but you do feel as though the manager does respect the fact that he has he runs a meritocracy on the one side, but on the other side, I think he does come to agreements with players about what they can expect, and I think if they're fair to him, he's fair to them. So I think that's worth remembering. Basically, what I'm saying is sometimes you either need a bit of luck, which is the sort of luck we don't want, which is an injury crisis, to get beyond world-class players, or a season to fall off the cliff so you can just play who you want, or you need a little bit of a boost to climb the barrier, which could well be a couple of players leaving and the manager putting full faith in him.
Yeah, I think as well, something that could, you know, serve as a form of luck is you have an elite team and an elite environment, and that's usually, in many people's view, the opposite to what constitutes a young player breaking through. But if you look at Man United down the years, for example, no one would tell you that Phil Neville or John O'Shea were world-class footballers, but they had the right attitude and the right mentality, and they were deemed mentally good enough, and the rest was ingrained into them through the environment that they were working in. And I think that for Curtis in particular is massive because, like John says, he does back himself and he's got huge self-confidence. And I think that in many ways, Liverpool staff have looked at that and thought, well, that's sort of the hardest thing that we could try and get into a player right now. The rest we can bring out of them through the players that they're training with, through the environment they're in, the people they're learning from, like James Milner, for example, and the day-to-day of what they're doing at the club. So I think for me, look, for example, there's no surprise that any player who's ever worn a shirt for Barcelona comes with a premium. It's because they've trained with Lionel Messi every day, and I think that is forming part of Curtis Jones' education, and I think the same will apply for the likes of Harvey Elliott. Even if Dejan Lovren leaves in the summer, I think the same conversation might start being had about Sepp Vandenberg, that we don't need to go and spend money on players when we've already got a player in the environment who's learning so much every day, that it's just about the opportunities they get when they get them, and that will then lead to the experience. And that is a case of maybe the only thing that you can look back on from this season negatively is that we don't get to ride the momentum of Curtis being around the squad for a whole season, and then once the league was won, him getting the odd start against Burnley Saturday just gone, for example.
Just on that one, Dan, the next thing you need to see for Curtis and from Curtis is him being one of the first 11. Getting to play with the world-class players and getting to bring the best out of himself, but his job to bring the best out of them as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I always call back to this season in the League Cup against Arsenal, where it's a game where everyone goes into it and they're expecting it to be the Naby Keita and Mesut Ozil show. And what you see is two players who don't really have, for whatever reason, I wouldn't say the motivation, but they don't really have the desired effect on the game through playing with players that they're not usually used to, players not on the same level, if you like. And I think that's where I think the same could apply to young players. Certain players, when they feel like they're dropping a level, come to the fore and they say, well, I'm clearly, I can show I'm the best player on this pitch. And other players think I need to be around better players for myself to shine. And that could apply to young players. Like I say, Curtis really backs himself and he probably thinks, well, I'm sound playing with Nico Williams. I've grown up with him, but I'd also want to play with Trent because, he's tactically supreme and he's a player who I think can improve my game. And I think that's where, like you say, that needs to be from the starting games. It's a completely different kettle of fish, as we know, studying a game from the bench, looking at a game to come into and impact and affect. Whereas if you start a game from minute go and you're around the players that have won the Liverpool League title, for example, then you see that development start to come further. And we also get to start to see what type of player he's going to be, because I think that's been the big thing. I think people are still looking at him wondering what type of player he's going to become. There's a clear identity to someone like Elliott, I think, in terms of what he can be, whereas Curtis, you're just looking at tactically, you're looking at his attributes, you're looking at what stands out, what needs work, and you're just wondering where his future lies exactly.
On this, Gareth, it's really interesting. There was a really good Crouch quote that was sort of bandied about social over the weekend about Gerrard, which was that, Steven could have played anywhere, that he had the ability to play absolutely everywhere, not just play anywhere, but be world class. For me, I don't want to end up sort of putting Curtis against an unbelievable standard here, but there is a bit of that for me. Like, for instance, if Klopp came out and went, to be honest with you, we're going to play number 6 next season. He's just going to sit in, play number 6, keep the ball ticking over. I'd go, all right. If Klopp wins, we're going to give him a go left back. We've got a shortage of left backs. He's going to get 30 games left back. He's going to alternate with Robbo. I'd go, all right. Given the size of him, the ability of him, the brain of him, I really am still at the point with him where I feel a bit like, well, we could give him a go anywhere, really, apart from possibly just centre forward or keeper.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's only 19 years old, isn't he? So, and I think there's a Klopp quote where he says, as long as anything mad happens, he will be a Liverpool player. And so, I think as has been said, everyone expects him to make it. He's got all this. It's a sim. You shouldn't be comparing him to Gerrard, obviously, but there is a comparison to be made in terms of lots of things in his locker, which I think is what you're saying there. In terms of there's loads of, he hasn't nailed a position as such as things stand. But I kind of think, like, I can see what you're saying, but when he drops back down a level, it always not makes me laugh, but you look at it and think, fucking hell, because when he goes back to playing with under 19s and things like that, he's just miles above them. He's miles bigger, he's miles better. He seems to be just putting it in the top bin with absolute ease. And you're like, well, if he's doing that there, then when he does find his feet in the Premier League, I imagine the position that everyone's got in mind for him is more towards the front, let's be honest, because, you want him doing that. You want him putting it top in. You want him scoring the goals like he did against Everton. I mean, that was a magical moment, but the technique to be able to do that is not easy, as we've seen from all the people trying to replicate it on social media the last few weeks or whatever. So, he's got that there, and it will remain to be seen exactly how it'll work and when it clicks and when he suddenly finds that level. But it'll be exciting to watch as well. I mean, it's only 2 appearances, isn't it? I think in the Premier League so far. I think it's Bournemouth, and you mentioned the other one, was it? Well, I can't remember what the other one was now.
Norwich.
But either way, you need that Norwich, yeah. So that's what he needs next. And so when football resumes again, that's what you want to see from him. And it'll be frustrating in a way, because the type of character he is and type of person he is, from what we see, he'll be itching to be out there and itching to be involved and itching to show what he can do. But he has got to sort of bide his time. He hasn't done badly so far.
Last little thing on it, John. Basically, where do you think he gets his chance, and what do you think that looks like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if we're sticking with 4-3-3, I think one of the 2 attacking midfield roles is the most likely. I feel he can play front 3, I think, as well, but I think, on one of the 2 wider positions, I think he'd be fine there. But you look at the goal return that those 3 are getting, and you wouldn't want to sort of have that expectation of Kurt at this stage to be producing, those sort of numbers. So I'd be surprised if he got a start in that front 3, although you might sort of bring him on. But I think in one of those 2 sort of midfield positions, ahead of Fabinho or Henderson or whoever it is playing there, feels the most likely thing to me at the moment. But, as you've also sort of alluded to, his versatility, will be a strength in this. And I think just seeing him more on the bench and when you talk about Lallana and Shaqiri, you might think, well, they haven't had loads of minutes this season, so even knocking them out doesn't necessarily improve it. And I get that, but they are on the bench more often than not. So certainly Lallana, when he's fit, is more on there. Yeah. And I think he would be more tempted to use a Curtis Jones in certain situations than he would be for others. Depending on what we see from this season, if we can get it back up and running, and they play all the games and we can get it wrapped up in 2-3 games, then you'd hope to be an opportunity there to use him, because he's a bright talent. He's the kind of player that we should be nurturing, that you want to be seeing more of, and his potential sky high. There's no ceiling on, I don't think, on what kind of footballer he can be. That's not necessarily guaranteed that it will happen for him, because loads of things can happen in football and in life to stop it. But there's certainly no reason why he can't be a brilliant footballer for Liverpool. So let's all try and do our best to make sure that happens. Excellent. All of us. What are you doing to forget?
I've done this show, John. Get off me back.
It wasn't just you. That was me doing the doing your bit for the war point.
The wider you. All right. Thank you very much indeed for the show this week. It's been the business. Thank you very much to Sarah, Andy for producing. We've had Gareth, John, and Dan. All have been marvellous. Do check out what Dan's working on Liverpool.com. Gareth and John as well, doing great stuff for Tall Player behind the scenes right the way through the week. Thank you very much if you take the time on Hot Mic. If you haven't and you'd like to know what it is, you can download it from the App Store. It is hotmic.io as a website, and we do bits and pieces on there. It means that it will have gone out as we do it as live. It means all the bits in the middle where we're trying to sort out technical stuff, and before and when we're messing around, you get to enjoy all that as well. But thank you very much this week to everyone who's been involved, and you for listening as well. Look after yourself, stay safe. It is the Anfield Wrap, brought to you by the message of wash your hands.